It was a gray, brisk morning in San Francisco, the kind of morning where the fog hangs heavy over the bay and every breath feels like possibility mixed with tension. I had been preparing for this day for nearly 3 years, but today it felt like the first real test, not of my idea, but of whether the world would see the vision I had nurtured through sleepless nights, countless failures, and relentless self-belief. Walking into the glass-walled conference room, I felt the hum of the city behind me, a reminder that millions of dreams collided every day in buildings just like this. I clutched my laptop and my meticulously prepared deck, heart racing but mind laser-focused. Across the polished oak table sat 6 venture capitalists, faces trained in scrutiny, their designer suits crisp, their expressions borderline smug. They didn't see the founder in front of them. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the strategy sessions, the prototypes that hadn't yet worked, the endless iterations, or the countless sacrifices. They saw a Black woman, a risk, a niche. I drew a deep breath and began my pitch. My voice was steady, deliberately calm, though my heart pounded like a drum in my chest. I walked them through the problem my startup solved, the inefficiencies in the existing market, and the unique technology my team and I had built. I detailed revenue projections, market analysis, and scalability potential. My slides flashed graphs and charts, testimonials from early beta users, and prototypes that demonstrated how intuitive, seamless, and revolutionary the platform could be. Yet their eyes told me the truth. They were not seeing me. Their attention flicked from the deck to my presence, from the numbers to my identity. One man leaned back, arms crossed, a half smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "It's ambitious," he said slowly, "maybe too ambitious for someone without prior exits." The condescension dripped like ice water, but instead of freezing me, it stoked the fire inside me. I was not here to fit into their mold. I was here to redefine the mold itself. I paused, letting their silence linger before continuing. I emphasized the potential impact, the problem we were solving at scale, the millions of users who could benefit from our solution, the partnerships we were already forming, and the strategic moves that positioned us uniquely in the market. Each word, each slide, each example was chosen to combat not only skepticism, but the unspoken bias I could feel in the room. Halfway through the pitch, I asked a simple question designed to redirect their focus from doubt to curiosity. Imagine a platform that serves this underserved market seamlessly, bridging gaps no one else has thought to bridge. How much do you think that's worth in terms of social and economic impact? A tense silence followed. Some shifted in their chairs. One leaned forward, eyebrow raised. The room had been skeptical, but now a spark of interest flickered. Their skepticism was expected, and honestly, it was welcome. I thrived on challenge. I thrived on proving what people considered impossible. I had spent years preparing for this moment, refining every metric, anticipating every objection, and yet remaining adaptable, human, and authentic. I wanted them to see the truth, not a statistic, not a demographic, not a niche, but a founder with vision, grit, and unwavering determination. And then it happened. One of the investors, a man known for his blunt critiques, leaned forward and asked a question that was almost rhetorical. "You know you're asking us to bet billions on a concept that's never been executed at this scale with someone with no prior exits. What makes you think you can pull it off?" I smiled, allowing a pause to emphasize the weight of my next words. "Because I've been executing it every day for the last 3 years, and because I've already done the work that many people won't even attempt. This isn't just a concept, this is a validated vision, and if you're willing to look beyond assumptions, you'll see that the opportunity isn't just here, it's massive." The room fell silent again, the tension thick enough to touch. I had planted the seed, but now I needed them to open their minds and see the potential, not the stereotypes. When the first no came, it hit like a thunderclap. They cited market risk, lack of precedent, and, most subtly, most painfully, my identity as a factor. I felt it, sharp and cold, the unspoken assumption that my vision was limited, my ambition too big for a Black woman in the tech world. It would have been easy to feel disheartened, but I refused. Instead, I did what I always did when faced with doubt. I absorbed every critique, every sideways glance, every questioning tone, and converted it into strategy. Their skepticism became raw material, fuel to sharpen my execution, to refine the pitch, to expand my network, to anticipate obstacles. I walked out of the room that day, not defeated, but energized. That night, back in my small apartment filled with sketches, prototype notes, and half-empty coffee cups, I pulled out my whiteboard. Every no became a checkpoint, every dismissive comment a challenge to overcome. I plotted strategies, projected cash flow, outlined outreach campaigns, and set new milestones. I wasn't asking for permission, I was defining reality. And then I thought about you, the audience watching this, wondering if your ideas are too big, your dreams too audacious, your voice too small. Let me ask you, have you ever been underestimated? Have you been dismissed because of who you are, what you look like, or the environment you come from? If so, let that feeling fuel you, because sometimes the people meant to fund your dreams are the same ones who can't see your potential. And that's okay. That's exactly the fuel you need. As I sketched out the next steps, I whispered to myself, they see limits, I see billions. They see risk, I see opportunity. They see niche, I see empire. Before ending the night, I looked into the camera, if this were a video version, audience-focused, and said, if you're watching this and you've been doubted, dismissed, or overlooked, I want you to pause for a moment. Think about your vision. Are you letting someone else's assumptions define your path? If not, hit that subscribe button and join me, because in the next parts of this story, you're going to see exactly how we turn those assumptions into billions, step by step. This was part 1, a story of underestimation, fire, and the first spark of a journey that would defy expectation. It's not just my story, it's a blueprint for anyone who has been told they're too much or not enough. The next morning, I woke with a sense of urgency pulsing through my veins. San Francisco's skyline was just visible through the fogged windows of my apartment, but my mind was already racing ahead, strategizing, recalibrating, and visualizing the next moves in the chess game that was my startup journey. The pitch room from yesterday lingered in my thoughts. Their doubts, their dismissive comments, even their thinly veiled surprise that I had held my ground, all of it fueled me. I grabbed my laptop, opened a blank spreadsheet, and began mapping every possible objection they could throw at me in the next round of meetings. Market penetration, adoption rate, competitor's edge, technological scalability, nothing escaped my scrutiny. Every no I had received was converted into a detailed plan, every doubt into a calculated step forward. I decided it was time to broaden my circle. I reached out to mentors, seasoned entrepreneurs, tech veterans, even one former investor who had once advised me to stick to smaller markets. I needed guidance, validation, and more importantly, to show my potential backers that I wasn't alone in my vision. Each conversation reminded me that I was not merely surviving in a skeptical environment, I was strategically preparing to dominate it. By afternoon, I was at a co-working space downtown, surrounded by buzzing energy and the hum of innovation. My team gathered around a long table cluttered with laptops, prototypes, and scribbled notes. I explained the feedback we had received, and together we dissected it, reworked our product demo, and brainstormed strategies that would make the next presentation not just compelling, but irresistible. I looked around at my team, diverse, talented, driven, and felt a swell of pride. They had believed in me from the beginning, long before anyone else had. Their faith was not passive, it was active, relentless, strategic. And in that moment, I realized that the power of my startup wasn't just in the technology or the idea, it was in the people who believed, worked, and risked alongside me. The evening descended, and I took a solitary walk along the Embarcadero. The water shimmered under the fading sun, and I felt the weight of the journey ahead. This was more than a quest for funding. It was about redefining perceptions. Each step I took on the wooden pier echoed my determination. They might underestimate me, but I was unshakable. Their no was not a barrier, it was a spark. I opened my sketchbook, the one I had carried since my earliest designs, and began jotting notes for the next pitch. I drew out new graphs, annotated projected growth, and sketched a potential market expansion. The sketchbook had always been my silent confidant, translating raw ideas into tangible action. Each line felt purposeful, each note a seed for the empire I envisioned. And here's where I pause to ask you, my audience, have you ever been in a room where every glance seemed to dismiss your potential, where assumptions about your identity or experience overshadowed your actual capability? If yes, you're in the right place, because in the next stages of this journey, you'll see exactly how these doubts, these assumptions, became fuel for building something unimaginable. The following week was grueling. I scheduled back-to-back meetings with venture firms across the Bay Area. Each room brought new faces, new skepticism, and slightly different forms of doubt. Some questioned the scalability, others subtly hinted at market saturation. Yet every conversation was a learning experience. Each critique, another opportunity to refine and reinforce my strategy. By midweek, I had identified a pattern. Most investors weren't opposed to the idea itself, they were opposed to the audacity of a Black female founder leading a multi-billion-dollar vision. Their doubts were implicit, often unspoken but pervasive. I realized that my battle wasn't only financial, it was cultural, perceptual. And this awareness changed my approach. I began to anticipate their biases in every slide, every demo, every conversation. I addressed them not aggressively, but strategically, demonstrating competence, foresight, and undeniable evidence of traction. One afternoon, I visited a small tech incubator in downtown Oakland. Here, the walls were plastered with startup posters, sticky notes, and success stories. I set up my demo station, inviting a few industry veterans to interact with the platform. I watched intently as they explored the features, noting every hesitation, every impressed glance. One veteran, a man with over 20 years in venture funding, leaned over and said quietly, "You've thought of everything. I wish more people could see the potential here." That simple acknowledgement lit a fire inside me. It was validation, yes, but also a signal. I could see the path forward. I spent hours that evening refining the narrative for the upcoming investor showcase, ensuring every potential doubt had a counterpoint, every potential skepticism a clear, strategic response. And here's the crucial lesson for you. Facing systemic doubt is part of scaling anything meaningful. It is not just about proving your idea. It's about proving that your vision transcends expectation, transcends bias, and demands recognition. By Friday, we were ready for the next major meeting, a pitch that could secure not just initial funding, but the credibility to attract further strategic partners. The team gathered late at night in a quiet room, laptops glowing, coffee cups scattered. I ran through the pitch one final time, emphasizing market data, prototype performance, user engagement metrics, and the unique differentiators that made our startup unstoppable. Before leaving for the meeting, I turned to my team and said, "Remember, it's not just about the funding. It's about setting a precedent. We are here to redefine the narrative. They might underestimate us, but we are undeniable." And I want to pause here to ask you, have you ever been told your dream was too big or not for you? Think about that as you continue this story. Let it inspire you, challenge you, and remind you that every doubt thrown your way can become the fuel for your breakthrough. With that, we left the office, determination etched into every step, knowing that the next room we entered could change everything, and we were ready. The sun had barely risen over the San Francisco skyline when I arrived at the investor showcase, a building pulsing with energy and anticipation. The lobby was filled with founders, venture partners, and curious observers, all navigating the labyrinth of tech ambition and opportunity. My team and I moved through the crowd with a quiet intensity. There was no room for doubt, no space for hesitation. Today was about translating months of strategy, refinement, and relentless preparation into a single, undeniable performance. As we entered the presentation room, the contrast between expectation and reality became palpable. The panel of investors was already seated, their expressions a mix of polite courtesy and measured skepticism. They had heard hundreds of pitches that month. Many of them had seen founders overpromise and underdeliver. But what they had not seen and could not yet imagine was a Black female founder standing at the precipice of reshaping an entire market. I set up my laptop, arranged the visuals, and rehearsed the opening lines under my breath. Then, with a steady breath, I began. Good morning. What I'm about to show you isn't just a product. It's a revolution in how people interact with digital marketplaces. And I'm here to show you that this revolution is both achievable and scalable. Every slide, every demo, every graph was designed to build credibility while subtly confronting bias. I illustrated projected growth, highlighting not only market statistics but user behavior analytics, early adoption trends, and competitive differentiation. I emphasized how our platform uniquely catered to underserved demographics, ensuring that investors saw both social impact and profitability as intertwined, not separate. Midway through the presentation, I paused and asked the room a critical question. What if your assumptions about potential could be wrong? What if the founder you underestimated is the very person who will define the future of this market? The pause lingered longer than expected, tension hanging like an invisible thread. Eyes flickered, some leaned in, some nodded, and I knew in that moment that the narrative was shifting. The room erupted with questions, tough, challenging, probing every weakness I hadn't anticipated. But instead of faltering, I answered each question with precision, confidence, and transparency. I illustrated the product live, highlighted user feedback, and walked them through the scalability plan with charts and case studies. Each response was a subtle assertion. Assumptions about my identity did not define my ability. My track record and vision did. As the presentation concluded, silence hung in the room for a heartbeat before applause began to ripple across the panel. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was recognition, the first tangible sign that my vision had broken through the wall of preconception. I exchanged glances with my team, seeing mirrored pride, relief, and the quiet thrill of victory. Later that evening, back at our co-working space, we debriefed. The investors' questions had been intense, but they revealed far more interest than initial skepticism had suggested. I pulled up the live feedback notes from the showcase, highlighting points that drew curiosity, praise, and even suggestions for partnerships. These were not just investors, they were potential allies, resources, and catalysts. I took a moment to speak directly to the camera, imagining the audience watching this story unfold. This is where many founders give up, I said. When the room seems stacked against you, when bias and doubt loom large, it's easy to shrink. But here's the truth. Persistence, preparation, and clarity of vision turn skepticism into opportunity. Every assumption that says you can't is actually a roadmap to proving that you can. The next steps were crucial. We scheduled follow-up meetings, refined projections, and engaged with potential strategic partners. I knew the journey wasn't over. It was only intensifying. And here's an insight for anyone watching. The higher the stakes, the bigger the resistance. And the bigger the resistance, the more dramatic the eventual breakthrough. During the week, we iterated on our prototype based on investor feedback. Minor adjustments to the user interface, added security features, enhanced analytics, all small tweaks that had significant impact. My team and I worked late nights, fueled by coffee, determination, and the knowledge that each refinement moved us closer to turning assumption into validation. And now a question for the audience. Have you ever faced a room full of people who doubted you? Were you ready to turn their doubt into your strategy? Think about it, because in the next parts, you'll see exactly how we navigated bias, overcame structural skepticism, and transformed a no into multi-billion-dollar opportunity. By the end of part 3, the foundation for transformation was set. The stage was not just for a startup pitch, it was for a revolution, and we were ready. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our co-working space, casting long shadows across whiteboards covered in sketches, projections, and colorful sticky notes. The energy was electric, a mixture of anticipation and determination that only comes from being on the precipice of something monumental. Today wasn't about pitching. It was about executing the next phase, proving that our concept could not only survive scrutiny, but thrive under it. I walked through the space, glancing at the team absorbed in their work. Engineers were fine-tuning the interface, analysts were running simulations, and designers were polishing visual flows to ensure every interaction felt intuitive. I took a deep breath, knowing that the culmination of countless hours of preparation and revision rested on the next few weeks. We were moving from theory to proof, a critical inflection point. The no from previous investors still echoed, not as a discouragement, but as a driving force. Every question, every skeptical glance, every underestimated assumption had become fuel. We had compiled detailed responses to every doubt, integrated them into our live demos, and prepared counter-narratives for the subtle biases that had been so pervasive in initial meetings. I gathered the team for a quick briefing. Today, I said, voice steady but infused with urgency, we move from planning to proof. We show that assumptions about who can lead, who can innovate, and who can scale are fundamentally wrong. Our platform isn't just technology, it's a statement, a challenge to outdated perceptions. We mapped out a rigorous schedule of live user demonstrations, simulated stress tests for our infrastructure, and direct engagement with strategic partners who had expressed tentative interest. Each step was meticulously planned, every contingency accounted for. I emphasized to my team that this wasn't just about performance, it was about narrative. Every action had to reinforce that the platform was viable, scalable, and indispensable. By mid-morning, I was on a video call with a potential strategic partner based in New York. Their initial skepticism was evident in the cautious phrasing of questions, but I leveraged the data we had compiled, market analytics, beta user feedback, and projections that demonstrated tangible demand. As I walked them through the platform's capabilities, I could sense their resistance melting, replaced by cautious curiosity. The tone shifted subtly but unmistakably, the first sign that our strategy was working. After the call, I took a moment to reflect. It was one thing to defend a vision in a sterile presentation room. It was another to engage with real stakeholders in real time, responding dynamically, adapting instantly, and asserting authority without arrogance. I realized that each interaction wasn't just about selling a product, it was about reshaping perception, and that required not just preparation, but emotional intelligence, resilience, and unshakable confidence. That evening, our team regrouped to analyze progress. Notes were compared, feedback categorized, and strategies refined. Minor adjustments were made to interface flows, messaging, and visual cues, ensuring that every touchpoint with investors or strategic partners conveyed both competence and vision. We weren't just optimizing a product, we were constructing an experience that demanded recognition. At this stage, I decided to reach out to mentors and advisors who had experienced similar skepticism in the industry. Their insights were invaluable, offering nuanced advice on addressing bias, anticipating objections, and framing data in a way that subtly confronted assumptions without alienating potential allies. These conversations underscored an essential truth. The most significant challenges weren't technical, they were perceptual, and perception could be influenced, strategically, ethically, and powerfully. Late into the night, I addressed the team. We are redefining the narrative, I said. Every doubter, every skeptic, every no is our roadmap. We turn bias into opportunity. We turn assumptions into data-driven evidence. And when the world watches this story unfold, they will not just see a product, they will see proof that vision, persistence, and strategy can overcome systemic doubt. As I spoke, I felt the weight of the journey so far. The battles won in conference rooms, the meticulous preparation, the sleepless nights, and the strategic pivots. Yet I also felt anticipation for what was next, the moment when the culmination of this work would be visible, tangible, and undeniable. Before ending the session, I addressed the audience, imagining those watching this unfold as a narrative. Have you ever been dismissed because of your identity?
Undervalued because of assumptions others made about your experience or capability? Know this: every no is the foundation for your yes. Join us, subscribe, and witness how we turn skepticism into multi-billion-dollar proof. The next parts of this story reveal exactly how these assumptions crumble under preparation, strategy, and vision. By the close of Part 4, our startup had not only survived scrutiny, it was emerging stronger, more compelling, and poised for the decisive steps that would redefine both market expectations and societal perceptions. The groundwork was laid, the narrative was set, and the fire ignited by doubt continued to burn, lighting the path forward.
The morning air was crisp and carried with it the subtle scent of the bay, mingling with the energy inside our co-working space. Today was unlike any other day. This was the day we would engage with a panel of investors whose influence could define not just the trajectory of our startup, but the broader perception of minority-led innovation in Silicon Valley. My team and I arrived early, setting up the space with meticulous precision, screens aligned, prototypes ready, analytics dashboards glowing. Every detail mattered. As we waited for the investors to arrive, I reflected on the journey so far. Every skeptical glance, every patronizing comment, every implicit bias had been absorbed, analyzed, and converted into strategy. I reminded myself and my team that the true power of our venture wasn't just in the product itself, but in how we had taken every doubt and turned it into preparation, resilience, and undeniable proof. The first investor walked in, followed by 2 more, and soon the room was fully occupied. Their body language was subtle but telling: crossed arms, cautious glances, polite but restrained smiles. They had seen many founders before, but what they hadn't seen was a Black female founder commanding the room with authority, knowledge, and clarity. I began the pitch. Good morning. Today, I'm not just presenting a product, I'm presenting a vision that has been questioned, doubted, and underestimated. And I am here to show that those assumptions were not only wrong, they underestimated the scale of possibility and the force of preparation behind it. Each slide was crafted to answer the unspoken objections: market analytics, projected revenue growth, user engagement metrics, and technical scalability. I anticipated their skepticism, addressing it directly without being confrontational. I demonstrated our beta performance live, showing real users interacting seamlessly with the platform. The room was tense, every second measured, every question a potential obstacle, but we were prepared. Halfway through, I paused to engage the room. Imagine a world where potential is defined not by assumptions, but by evidence, where leadership is recognized not by preconceived notions, but by results. That is the world we are building, and it starts here. The silence that followed was profound. Eyes met eyes, some skeptical, some intrigued, all forced to confront the reality of what they were witnessing. Questions came fast and precise. One investor asked about scalability under sudden high demand. Another inquired about competitor differentiation. I answered each with confidence, supported by data and live demonstrations. Each response subtly reinforced the narrative. Assumptions about my identity were irrelevant. The strategy, vision, and execution defined the outcome. By the time the session concluded, the panel's demeanor had shifted. The skepticism had not vanished, but curiosity and respect had begun to replace it. My team and I exchanged quiet nods. This was a pivotal moment. We had not only defended our concept, we had begun to redefine the narrative itself.
Later that evening, back at our workspace, we debriefed and strategized for follow-up interactions. We categorized investor feedback, highlighting potential allies and key points of persuasion for those still hesitant. Every comment was an opportunity, every critique a stepping stone to refinement. I addressed the team, emphasizing the strategic importance of narrative. Remember, I said, we are not just selling a product. We are selling vision, credibility, and proof that excellence transcends assumption. Every meeting, every pitch, every interaction is part of a larger story, and that story is being written by us. We spent hours refining projections, enhancing visual demos, and rehearsing nuanced responses to possible objections. Each iteration brought us closer to a presentation that was not only compelling, but irrefutable. I reminded the team that we weren't just preparing for funding, we were preparing for recognition, influence, and the opportunity to redefine perception in a market often constrained by bias. During a late-night video call with a mentor, I asked for feedback on the latest strategy. Their advice was both practical and empowering. You've anticipated objections, you've built evidence, and you've demonstrated resilience. Now, make them feel the scale of what they are witnessing. Confidence is contagious. Let them see the vision and the force behind it. By the end of the week, we had secured tentative commitments from several investors, signaling that the shift in perception was real. The skepticism that had dominated every prior interaction was giving way to cautious optimism, and for the first time, it became clear. The narrative was no longer about doubt or bias. It was about potential, performance, and proof. I paused to engage the audience directly. Have you ever faced doubt so pervasive that it felt systemic? That's exactly where we were. But preparation, clarity, and relentless execution turned every no into a stepping stone. And as you continue this story, you'll see how those stepping stones became the foundation for billions in valuation, influence, and transformation. By the close of Part 5, our startup had not only survived scrutiny, it had thrived. Every assumption that had sought to diminish us had instead amplified our resolve. The stage was set for the final act, the culmination of strategy, vision, and unyielding determination. And the world, whether ready or not, was about to witness a Black female founder redefine what was possible.
The early morning fog hung low over San Francisco, the city awakening slowly while our office buzzed with focused intensity. Today was more than a day. It was the culmination of months of preparation, strategy, and relentless perseverance. Every investor meeting, every skeptical glance, every doubting comment had led to this pivotal moment. The final round of negotiations with our key investors was set, and the stakes had never been higher. As I entered the boardroom, the energy was thick with anticipation. The panel of venture capitalists, some seasoned veterans, others rising stars, sat with expectant faces, reviewing the materials we had submitted. Their expressions were a mix of guarded curiosity and subtle skepticism, but I knew that beneath it all, the dynamics had shifted. They had seen our preparation, our resilience, and our capacity to execute. I began my presentation with a calm, deliberate tone. Good morning. Today is not just about evaluating a startup. It's about witnessing how persistence, vision, and strategy overcome assumptions. It's about understanding that potential is not defined by bias and that innovation knows no demographic boundaries. The opening slides trace the journey of our company from its inception: ideation, development, user testing, and iterative refinement. I highlighted key milestones, illustrating both growth and adaptability. Each slide was carefully sequenced to build not only credibility, but also a narrative of transformation, from skepticism to validation, from doubt to undeniable proof. Midway through, I introduced a live demonstration of our platform under stress test conditions, showing scalability under high demand. The investors leaned in, some exchanging impressed glances. I addressed questions with precision, weaving data, analytics, and storytelling seamlessly. One investor asked pointedly, "How will you sustain growth while maintaining quality and user satisfaction?" I responded, emphasizing strategic partnerships, technology redundancy, and user-centric design philosophy. The room shifted. Tension gave way to curiosity. Then came the pivotal moment. I shared a projection scenario showing multi-billion-dollar potential, backed by real user data, market analytics, and financial modeling. What you see, I said, is not a hypothetical. It is a trajectory built on meticulous planning, relentless execution, and proof that assumptions about leadership and capability do not define success. The silence in the room was tangible. Expectation hung like a pendulum, each second stretching longer than the last. After the presentation concluded, a quiet deliberation ensued. The investors whispered, evaluated, and cross-referenced the data we had provided. My team and I waited, poised but not anxious. This moment was the result of months of strategy and preparation. Finally, one senior investor looked up, nodding slightly. "Your execution is impeccable," he said, "and your metrics are strong. We underestimated the depth of your vision." The words hit like a surge of validation. All the doubt, all the condescension,
All the subtle biases we had faced were now being replaced with acknowledgement, respect, and tangible opportunity. A deal was proposed, terms favorable, conditions strategic, and potential expansive. It was a turning point, the culmination of relentless perseverance, strategic foresight, and unyielding belief in our vision. I turned to address the team. This is the moment we've been building toward, not just for funding, but for recognition, impact, and transformation. Every assumption, every doubt, every barrier has been turned into a stepping stone toward this achievement. And now, the world will see that leadership and innovation know no demographic boundaries. Behind the scenes, we celebrated quietly, understanding the gravity of what had been achieved. But we also knew the journey was ongoing. The execution, scaling, and continuous innovation would define the next phase. The real work, after validation, was to maintain momentum and continue proving that potential is limitless when strategy, vision, and resilience converge. I turned once again to the audience, imagining viewers following this journey. Have you ever been underestimated, told your vision was too big, your ambition misplaced, or your potential limited? Know this, every no is the foundation for a yes. Every assumption against you is a roadmap for proof. Subscribe and join our community, because in the next stories, you'll see how persistence, strategy, and belief transform challenges into extraordinary success. By the end of Part 6, our startup had not only secured billions in valuation, but had also redefined perception. The narrative shifted from doubt to validation, from bias to respect. The journey illustrated a universal truth: relentless preparation, unwavering vision, and the courage to confront assumptions can reshape outcomes and inspire change.